All right, hopefully this works. So as promised, I'm gonna make a video on how to take apart, how I take apart. Again, not really an instructional, just how I do stuff. I've got a lot to learn yet. I'm fairly inexperienced with these, but I figured a few things out and I figure I'll document and share what I know. So again, I'm up in the interior of Alaska here, and with the help of this bad boy and my modified coolant fed cab heater that used to be on the fender where this now sits, and I moved the coolant fed heater into the passenger side floorboard so it recirculates the interior air. Between those two, I can run the truck in about 40-45 below comfortably. Anything colder than that, I think it would start getting cold in the cab, but again, comfortably. See if I can get this in frame. So this is stock number, let's see, where's stock number on here. NSN stock number is, NSN stands for National Stock Number. It's 254-01-194-3323. Part number 19207, Sierra 0 Charlie November 11669898. This is a 30,000 BTU heater. Right, these are the diesel fed heaters that replace the coolant fed heater on the fender. And it's hard to get parts from anymore. Let me turn the music down here. Hopefully YouTube doesn't ban all that, but basically every year I clean it. If you know how to clean an oil fed boiler, it's pretty much the same thing. You're gonna clean the same parts. I'm gonna cover how I tear these down. To pull it out of the truck, essentially, you're gonna do this cannon plug connector right here. There's a band, two bands that'll go around. You have to pop this cover by these two screws. They're quarter turn lock screws. Terminal flat tip screwdriver. They pop right up. This cover right here has schematics on the inside if you ever need to troubleshoot and figure stuff out. The cover comes off, so I'm gonna set that off to the side. So first and foremost, if you haven't touched one of these in a long time, or if you're doing a new install to your truck in particular, i.e. you've got one that's used and you haven't run it before, first thing I recommend doing is going through and checking all your safety devices. There are thermal switches on here. I don't remember which ones they are. If you look at them and you understand mechanics and electrics, it'll make sense. This is your metering pump valve assembly. These four screws pop off and you'll see a blue diaphragm pump in there. Be very careful with that. You cannot get that part. It's very hard. This is how you adjust your amount of fluid you pump per metering click, if that makes sense. This is my particular line that goes in. So this is just a regular compression, regular compression fitting. I think 3/8, I don't remember the exact size, but it's MPT to compression, and it just screws in right on here. My filter underneath sits right here, and then the actual pump that pumps to this metering valve and the filter, it normally sits right here. That's going to sit down in the battery box per the original design, as best as I can tell. Again, I kind of worked with Big Mike's, Mike Verley at Big Mike's motor pool. I bought the pump from him because I was just given this heater up here in Alaska, and I didn't have the rest of the stuff for it, so he found me a pump and a filter. He may not always be able to do that for you, but in my experience, he's been pretty friendly for me. So before you run one of these, highly recommend you go through it, disassemble, take a look at the burner, clean it, take a look at the wick and I think it's called the vaporizer, and I'll point those out here in a little bit. Furthermore, on the circuit card right here, all these spade connectors, I highly recommend you take those off and clean the corrosion off of the connectors. A little bit does even matter. Haven't quite figured out what these two variable pots are for yet. I'm sure if I dig deep enough, I'll figure that out. And oh yeah, right here, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, this is your overtemp switch right here. I don't know what they're set to actually kick out at, but that's about all I figured out on that. Right, so pulling it out of the truck, like I said, you're gonna pop the cannon plug connector. You're gonna pop two hose clamps, big ones that go all the way around. This sits in a cradle that those hose clamps attach this to. So you undo those, remove those, undo your fuel line right here, and then literally you'll undo your hose clamp for the air hose. The air hose goes from this into the cab. This will lift out of the cradle. On mine, there's no bolts holding it in, it's just a band clamp. There is a screw underneath that cradle that holds the exhaust tube to the cradle. I don't have a picture of that right now. Sorry if I keep on leaving that music play, I'm gonna get banned on YouTube or something. All right, so first thing I do, right? It helps if you take this off because you can set it upright as you work on it. So it's just 4 Phillips screws all the way around. I use a number 2 Phillips screwdriver. So this is simply just a air deflector shroud that makes the connection from your heater to your air ducting hose in your truck. I did not swap out my air ducting for any of the new silicone hose, and mine works okay. I'm not saying that's the right or the wrong way, it's just what I've done. I've kept an eye on it. I do not leave it, this heater is set on high, even at 40 below when the truck is sitting stationary. I have seen once my cab start smoking, so I assume I probably got the air ducting a little too hot, but it's just a shroud. So that's off. Now the picture. So now I got this awesome flat surface right here. That is the end of the heat chamber. From my understanding, you do want to check this heat exchanger chamber for cracks. If you get cracks, you can get gases coming through, all that jazz. Not to mention you let the fire out. So inside that is the combustion chamber. When the directions, so the manual says basically when you're starting, and if you, I've got a video out there on how to start these things. Basically it says hold the switch in start position on the control box for 3 minutes. If it doesn't fire, let it cool down, I think for 3 minutes, and then do the second time. And it says after that, consult a tech or send it back to your depot shop or whatever. They are not lying when you say that. So this one would not fire on me. I believe my mantle is clogged because I didn't have clean enough fuel, as you saw in my my cold start disaster video for part 1. I still got a little bit of contaminated, we'll call it alternative fuel in the fuel tank, and I think someone went through here. A buddy of mine, and he knows who he is, told me he tried running black diesel through one of these heaters once and it clogged everything up. And I tell you what, he is not exaggerating about that. They are very particular about the cleanliness of fuel they use. So either run a separate tank with heating oil or run just straight pure diesel. And I'm not joking about pure diesel. So slice a little bit of residue of oil or alternative fuel mixes, and this thing does not want to fire. Normally it'll fire right off at about 45 below and no issues there. Okay, so this is your fan motor assembly. I don't know if that's the right term, but that's what I'm calling it. So basically it houses your fan and the motor that draws the air through. There are 4 screws around it that you're gonna loosen, and then it turns just ever so slightly and comes up. So it looks like that on all 4 sides. Screws can stay in there. As you see, there's the power wire for the motor, and there's a little grommet here. I just take and push the grommet in. Hopefully you can see all this. Right, so I pushed it in so it's no longer in the housing, it's sliding on the wire. Now I'm going to take and lay this down, and be careful it doesn't roll over on you so you don't damage any of the electronics on top here. Essentially, this wire is going to go to the common terminal on your temp switch. It's just a flat tip screwdriver. Number 1, number 2 work fine. Of course, I got a whole bunch of fuel, unburnt fuel in this thing. I was dumping it out for days when I took it off the truck. It was leaking down on the mount. If that would have fired, it would have been a fire hazard. In fact, a lot of guys say these things are just fires waiting to happen. And working with them the 2 years that I have, experiences I have, I would tend to believe it's probably, well, part of it might be due to lack of maintenance, lack of inspection, and then also because if you get what they call a hot start, so excess fuel built up in the combustion chamber. It's kind of like if anyone's had experience with a RC model turbine engine, kind of the same thing, right? So just pull that wire out. Disassembly is free now, and I set it off to the side. Not sure if it's a brushed or brushless motor. I'm sure it's probably a brushed motor. And I'm sure somebody knows a heck of a lot more about these than I do, but it doesn't sound like it's squealing or anything, like the bearings are going bad in it. So I'm gonna set this off to the side. Right, so now you have the combustion chamber in here, okay? I'm gonna crawl back on my stool so I can see what I'm doing. So, again, this is your metering pump assembly right here, okay? This is where the fuel comes out of the pump right here. All right, and it goes through into here, okay? See if I can zoom in on this. Okay. So, inside this shroud here, right, is your combustion chamber. And if anyone's had any experience with boilers, you have that deflection plate on the burner, and that's the same principle in here. The bottom side of that gets caked up with a bunch of crap that you got to clean. I do it before it starts getting cold every year. I'll tear it apart and clean it, or at least that's going to be my plan of attack moving forward here. First time you see a dirty one, it'll make sense. You'll see what to clean. And I'll show you the vaporizer, which you do not want to touch. It is unobtainium. I basically had to beg, plead, and borrow, and I'm pretty sure there's a Deuce and a Half Facebook page member that probably has rights to my third unborn child at this point, because I was able to buy one off of him. And he knows who he is, and I can't thank him enough for that. But I want to say it's a 7/16 inch wrench. You're going to loosen the fuel line here. Again, careful you don't pop it and obviously damage some of the electronics. These are resistors right here, so if it's running, those are going to be hot. So just a heads up. So I'm loosening both sides of this fuel line. Mine's copper tubing. I haven't dug into a whole bunch of these, so I don't really know what's out there predominantly. I can only assume this is it. So loosen both. They're both compression nuts is what they are. I guess I'll get this a little more centered screen. There you go. So I got them loosened. Next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pop this cover off. So I guess the best way to relate the known to the unknown is this is the igniter. I would call it, I would refer it to as like a spark plug for a motor, right? So this is going to be your signal line to heat a coil, kind of like if everybody remembers those push-in type cigarette lighters that used to be in automotives, in cars, in the ashtray. It's kind of what it looks like. So it, you push this collar down and then you turn it a little bit and it'll pop right on out, and you can pull it just like this. See, that's your heating elements right there. So the first time you're going to fire one of these for the season and you haven't done it in, say, any longer than a month, right? So first time you come back after a month, what you want to do is when you go through your starting procedure, with all this obviously assembled and on the truck, you're going to pull the post number 5, that spade connector. So basically you're going to pull one of these sides of this wire off. The number 5 right here is the easiest one to get to, right? So you're going to pull that off. That disables this igniter. And basically what that's going to do is, you can see down in there, you can't really see, and I'll show you when I take it apart. There's a wick down in there that you can kind of see from up top. That'll allow that wick to get wet. One of the things that happens with these is if somebody tries to fire them dry, that wick will burn up if it's not already wet. So putting it back into service after about a month of inactivity or longer, I would obviously go pop the top cover off this, pull terminal number 5, the spade connector 5, off just like that. Make sure it's not going to touch anything, it's out of the way. And then walk to your control box in the truck and hold down the start. Go, I don't know, a couple of long Mississippis, maybe a minute of trying to start. Just think long enough to get fuel to run through and get that wick wet. Another thing you could also probably do and get away with, in fact, I think I did this the first time I fired. I tore it apart and inspected everything. I took and I poured diesel down there on that wick to make sure I got it wet. So That's a little bit about starting it after a prolonged period of inactivity. So I would say anything longer than a month. Someone once told me about every week, even in the summertime, you want to try and fire one of these to keep everything going in there. All right, so I've loosened both fuel lines. I pulled out my igniter. I'll put this terminal back on before I forget about it. I'm sure that'll cause me troubles down the line. Otherwise, get a little forgetful sometimes. All right, I've unscrewed both ends of the fuel line. Very carefully, I'm gonna take it and remove it, okay? Oh yeah, I almost forgot. Before I actually pull that line out, there's a screw right, hopefully you can see it. Screw right here, okay? There's a screw right here. You're gonna remove that screw. If you can, use something magnetic so you don't drop that screw down. Oh, that's the wrong one. Drop that screw down in your combustion chamber because it can play like hell on you sometimes trying to get it back out. I did that last time I took this apart and played Jenga with it for a little while trying to get it back out. Sucks when you get it fully assembled when you're putting it back in and it falls out on you. All right, so what that does is undoing that screw. See this little collar here, now it goes all the way down to your wick. I can pull that out, it gets out of the way. Set that off to the side and I'm going to finish removing my fuel tubing. Fuel tube comes out and there's going to be fuel in it probably. Comes out just like that. Set that off to the side, it's out of the way. Now, mine didn't have any screws holding this in. I didn't see any screw holes for it either. So this should simply just pop right on out. So it's gonna lift on this side, so your neck here can get out from the hole, right? So I'm gonna lift it up like that and then straight out at an angle. So see all that soot in there? Right, I scrubbed on that not too long ago. I didn't really go hog wild and clean it, but all that soot I'm cleaning up every year. So I try and make it about as clean within reason as I can. I don't know if it's necessary or not. I suppose on this side of the burner it's probably not such a big thing. I know the biggest thing is making sure that all these holes right here, just like in a boiler, all these holes right here stay clean, to include these inner holes too, right? Because if air can't get through that, you're not gonna have a good clean burn. It looks like I got some debris or some crap in here, even though I just cleaned this, so, oh, there we go. So see, I pulled that out of there. So it sucked something in, some dirt. Okay, from here, you have two nuts right here. The top nut is gonna pull this grounding strap. The bottom nut will release this clamp. Once I get these clamps out, there's 4 of them that hold this, I'll call it this combustion tray on. Again, I don't know if that's the right term, but that's just what I'm calling it. There's 4 nuts that hold that on, and then that whole thing comes out as well, and I'll show you the inner guts. So, I believe on mine that's a 9mm nut, and that took me a while to figure that nut out. There we go. I'm sure probably proper assembly would be replacing these lock nuts. Seems to me like military manuals say every time you remove a lock nut, it's a one-time use only deal, so you have to replace it. I reused mine, don't tell anyone. I think this is a 9mm socket. All right. So I don't take the nuts off completely. I just run them up most of the way. 1 or 2 of these you're gonna have to leave in. They don't like to come out because of the proximity of your burn tube in here and the space that you have allocated for it. And putting these clamps back on is a learned trick, and it's fun the first time you do it. And I'll try and help you through the process as best as I know how to verbalize it. Oop, there we go. So that is what they look like, right? And I'll show you the hook that hook goes into. They're real fun to put in. Yep, see. Okay. So these bottom two on mine, the gap in here is tighter, so I can't really pull those out with this top combustion tray on. So from here, this just lifts straight up, right? There's your wick, and that's what you can see from this hole right here when you look in on the top with the igniter out. You'll be seeing it through that tube right there. So basically, light's not the best, but there you have it. You'll be able to look down into it in the burner and take a look at it. Also, when you're spraying diesel down in there to wet the wick, that's what you're aiming for right there. Wicks I have been able to find replacements for, but these guys right here, these are the vaporizers. They are the unicorns. And you see how mine's got a little bit of cracking, right? You want to try and leave that alone as much as you can. So I just cleaned this, and it doesn't look horrible. It doesn't look good either. The bottom side here that I'm showing you is all the gunk that you want cleaned out of there. I think it's about a 9 mil, give or take. Flat tip screw on that side, not on that side. All three of these, and this combustion plate will separate from this guy right here. Don't judge my mechanicking skills here. Sometimes I got two left thumbs, and it shows. So what I'm going to do today is, because I suspect it's clogged with the combustor, or the vaporizer, I suspect it's clogged with oil. I'm going to take and disassemble this thing, and then a buddy of mine recommended using kerosene oil, dipping it in, letting it soak in kerosene oil, swishing it around. Again, you want to try to be hands off as much as possible with those vaporizers. The last one I had just absolutely crumbled. I didn't know how fragile they were. Steep learning curve for me, obviously. But they are, you can't find them. I haven't found a source. And if anyone does know a source of those commercially still available, would definitely appreciate if you send me a message or drop me a comment or something where you can get them. Because I got a couple more of these that I would like to put it back into service, and I assume eventually I'm going to need one of those vaporizers. Right, so there you have it. This screw does come out, this plate does come off, and then you can get to the vaporizer a little better. Sorry, I was probably out of frame for that. This screw does come off, this plate does come off, and then you can get to the vaporizer. But I would not probably tear it down any more than that. From here, I'll take let's get back out a little bit. There you go. I'll take a wire brush. I use a brass one, and get good. I got a little bit of buildup I can show you. So you see all that crap there? That's the kind of stuff you're removing. Obviously the first time you clean it, it's quite a bit more built up. But there's an O-ring here too, or a sort of a seal. Be careful of that with your brush. Definitely be very careful of that vaporizer. 9 times out of 10 when these things won't fire and they're getting fuel, it's because of this guy right here. As you can see, it's hard, but it's cracking and crumbling, right? So, and as you see, that wick goes from here on down into, that's the wick right there, goes down to the vaporizer. So this will ignite here, and then the flame goes down here, and then obviously it gets blown through. So taking, I just cleaned it up, try and get all that crap out of there. Oh yeah, as I was saying, so on clean fuel with a clean what do you call it, clean heater, this thing will fire the first time every time within about a minute or so probably of the start cycle at 40 and 45 below. Not a problem every time I've had it happen. Now this time around I've got some of that contaminated, we'll call it contaminated fuel in there still, remnants of my alternate fuels from this summer. I didn't get it out enough, and well, it doesn't want to fire. So all right, we'll be back. All right, 1 million years later, we're back. So this clip, right, when you're putting it on, I would recommend, what I found for me is screw that nut all the way up to the top. I can seat that clip. You got to kind of fish around with that hook to get it to hook. Right in those bales right there. Okay, if that makes sense. On all 4 sides there's 4. Okay, fun part is you get to do it blind. So I'm gonna try and fiddle my way through this again and let you watch and see how bad I struggle. So when I'm putting this in, right, this cup is gonna sit down in this rim right here. I'm gonna want to take and orient the wick hole, I guess, to this hole about as centered as possible. And you're only gonna find out if it's right after you get everything put together. So one of the things I try and do is, oh yeah, when you put this on, you're gonna roll that 90 edge up, essentially. Or maybe I got that backwards. I think it goes like this, yeah. So it, that 90 edge, the screw hole is gonna be straight up. So I'm gonna slide that down over the wick hole there, and then looking through the side right here, I'm gonna take and try and eyeball it to see if it's centered this way, basically clockwise or counterclockwise on that hole, looking from the side. And if I can line that up, that's my best bet at getting this put back together correctly. Otherwise, the whole geometry of this guy's off. So I don't really know how to explain how to do this, but essentially, and it might not be able to see, but you reach down in there and you're going to push this clamp. There's 2 little posts on either side of that hook bail down there that I showed you. You're going to try and hold it in and down against the bezel as you screw this down. Now, if you got it in the right tracks, that hook will not spin on the underside. It'll simply rise up into that receptacle bail, if that makes sense. And you'll feel the whole clamp, I don't know if you saw that, but it started tightening down on me, right? So now I shouldn't be able to pull it up. It shouldn't move if I've got it latched correctly. That is a acquired feel to figure out how that works. And I probably messed up. I think I needed to put this one in first before I set that top combustor plate on. See if I can finagle it in. But you're going to take and make sure it's lined up to the inside of the teeth there, right? And then set the whole thing in there. And then try and look from the side to make sure you got set in the right channels. Yeah. And I guarantee this is probably horrible, but it's the best way I can figure out how to document this stuff for everybody. You know, there's a lot of knowledge out there. I'm sure there's dudes that probably did this for a living. Almost positive guys did this for a living in the Army that are probably laughing at me right now going, yeah, he's the typical journeyman 3-level guy. Struggle busting it along, but I know some of those guys are also aren't on social media. I know YouTube's around for a while, I would imagine. I'm gonna try and get some of this stuff documented and out there so we don't completely lose the knowledge on my generation, for what it's worth. I don't know if that's on there, but we're gonna give it a shot. We'll see if it'll capture. Oop. Okay, it's not moving left or right, so I think I got it in the right tracks. I'll tighten it down and we'll find out. Took me a while to figure out this method. I don't think I captured it right. I think it jumped, yep, it jumped right over. So what happened is that hook didn't engage in that bail down there. And I find a lot of times when I do this, it's because I didn't back that nut off far enough to start with. I'm bumping into everything. Or that hook turned on me. One of the two usually is the cause, the culprit. And I should, as I'm holding it in there, I should be able to lift up on that post to test it, to make sure it's latching where I've got it positioned. And you shouldn't feel that hook turning. I guess that's more of a feel because you're doing this thing blind. But this is probably the toughest part, putting these hooks back on. This toughest part of this whole teardown procedure. Once you figure it out, it's not that bad, as you can see. That's the hardest one right there. I've got it locked in. We're good to go. I'll make sure I back this one off all the way. And Garrett, if you're out there watching, go ahead and feel free to laugh and give me a hard time about this later. And have a beer for me, buddy. All right, I think that's in the right track. Slid it left or right, didn't move. Okay. Mr. Mike, if you're watching this, I appreciate all the help with these dang heaters and the Arctic setup that you've been giving me. My other two buddies up in those cold places, stay out of the wind and keep your Detroit running. You know who you are. As far as how tight I tighten these nuts down, I'm sure there's probably a torque spec somewhere for it, if not the general torque table. I use my highly calibrated hand here and a little bit of German torque values, if that makes sense. Guten tight, 2-finger rule as I always call it. Oop, oh, see, that one's loose. I don't think I tightened that one down hard enough. That was the first one. It probably, as the other side went down, probably loosened this side. Or it completely came off. We're about to find out. Alright, that's good there. Double check these. So this housing does split. Ooh, I think I got a screw loose there. This housing does split. This tin does come off the combustion chamber. So if you need to check it, that's the way of checking it, I guess. as far as crack inspections and everything go. All right, so I've got that bolted back in. I'll make sure I put on my ground. Yep, y'all know where that goes. I'm not gonna show you the horror of tearing this back down in front of you. Yep, we'll be back. I think I'm gonna have to go find a beer. Yep, first sergeant said come to his office. He's gonna rip my ass, I think. Well, I guess that's why you always have something 7 leveled. Beer assistant. All right. Through the magic of YouTube, that bottom plate's back on, and yeah. Let's just say good thing this isn't the active duty military and this part ain't flying. Woohoo! Not sure I'd have a job left after that. Okay, so where were we? Ground cable. So that goes back on. Second nut's gonna go back over on the post. This is another one that you don't want to drop down in there. I've done it. It's fun trying to find again. I'll tell you what, it is chilly in the shop today, I'll say. Or it feels chilly over where I'm at. It's about 30. Last time I looked at the temperature, it was 38 below out right now. Ambient temperature. And I definitely feel it in this shop. Right. Okay. That's on. If I remember right. This will go back on. Remember, when you put this in, so that is, this rim right here is going to sit inside that rim. So when you put it in, you want to tip that end down a little bit so it can go through the hole first. And then you just center it about as best as you feels right and seat it in there. All right. Next thing you want to put in is going to be your fuel tubing. If you don't put that in now, you won't be able to get it in when you get this tube in. Right, and flare nuts or compression nuts on either side, I believe. I'm not reusing mine. Or I am reusing mine, rather. I'm sure you should probably put new ones in there. Mine don't leak on me so far as I can tell. So we're going to set it. Again, not a how-to video, just what I do. And I'm not saying what I do is right. And to my buddy Dwayne, if you're watching, I still got that RV spot ready for you, buddy. Although I'm not sure you'd probably appreciate the weather right now. You might find it outright disrespectful out there for your tastes. All right. Now a crow's foot, 7/16 crow's foot would probably be best for this nut right here. Again, I'm probably a little wrong in my maintenance, but snug it down. You do want to check, like with any copper lines, to make sure there's no cracks in this one, kinks, or otherwise like lefty loosey, righty tighty. And I'm sure there's probably torque values for that too. Okay, that's in. Next one's going to be the tube. No idea what the actual name of this tube is. All I know is it houses the the igniter when it goes down in there, guides it down. I guarantee there's probably somebody out there that actually knows what the heck they're doing with these things, that probably rolling over in their grave, and I apologize for my crimes right now. This is looks like a 1/4-inch nut or flat tip. Magnetic nut's going to be the best on this one, or a magnetic nut driver, because this is another one of them screws with a lock washer on it that you don't want to drop down in there. I did that the other night when I was tearing apart cleaning it the first time. That was fun. German torque values, again, small screw, 2-finger rule. All right. See if I can zoom in on this for you. Okay. Try and further visualize what's going on here. So when you push this whole assembly down, you're going to feel this catch up somewhere down in there first. And as you're pushing down, kind of wiggling it a little bit, all of a sudden you feel that decompress and feel it seat on down in there. These two little pins right here on this collar are what you're turning to release out of that slot right there, if that makes sense. So that's your locking mechanism to keep that down in there. So see, it's catching right now. I would imagine it's probably catching on the lip of that guy right here of the combustion chamber, I would imagine. And I don't think mine's seated all the way, so I'm gonna wiggle it some more, see if I can't get it to clip down. There it goes. I don't know if you heard that, but you heard that clink. It released off its lip that was on, and it went fully down. I suspect if that's not close enough to the wick, it's probably not going to light either. All right. Plate, your wires slide through this little foam grommet, and your fuel line. I kind of always check these wires as I put them through for any nicks or bare wire showing, because that is live voltage going through there. I think it's probably 24 volts, but you can cause a short somewhere, I'm sure. These are turn lock screws. I think they're about 1/4 turn, maybe 1/2 turn, 3/4 turn, I don't know. There we go. Right. Time to put the motor housing on. Make sure your little grommet's still on there still. Okay. I'll push the wire through, and then I'll take and set this motor on the ground and seat the grommet right now while I still have 2 hands and room to do it. And it's just me, but I always seat it from the inside going out. Just seems easier that way for me. To each their own. You'll find your way. This grommet's starting to get hard. The rubber's starting to get hard, so I'm sure I'll have to replace it eventually. All right, from there, this wire is going to be on the grommet side, or thereabouts. I'm going to slowly feed the wire through the grommet as I set it back down. Close it up. There we go. Okay, there we go. All right. Give it its turn, and then tighten these locking screws down. 2-finger rule, or real light grip. If it weren't for all the dang fuel I had in my hands right now, I could probably actually grip this screwdriver and do it with 2 fingers. All right. Flip it on its back. Ooh, there you go. And wherever I put it, I'll put my shroud adapter back on. So I line mine up with the output tube offset to the right, just because of the way my truck sits. Again, I don't know what the correct way is. That's just what I do. I don't know if it even matters if there's a correct way or not. Sometimes when you're taking that heat hose, heat ducting off of this shroud, it will be stuck on there. I'm always afraid of breaking my heating duct because it's old and brittle. I've got a 1973 deuce and a half A2, and you know, every year it's heated up and it sticks on there. So sometimes the first time around pulling this off, I gotta actually pull these 4 screws, leave this on the truck to remove it, and then I'll separate this from the heating duct later. But again, I always kind of weigh the risk versus the reward on doing that, because if I need to use that truck, and up here we get sometimes, you know, 2 and 3 foot snowfalls, that truck is the only way I'm getting out of our driveway and down our street. You know, I need this heater, absolutely need this heater to work sometimes. So do I want to risk damaging it just to take it out? Not always. So it's a pain in the butt to get these back screws, but I'll take and remove the screws and leave the shroud in the truck as I'm pulling it. Okay, that's about that. That is how I, forgot one last bit. I'm sure there's a proper way to run this wire too. I run mine under. Usually this is, all these wire bundles are zip tied up together. Again, this is going to go back onto the common terminal of what I believe is your overheat switch. And I want to say if you look in the manual, it gives you adjustment procedures for those to make sure that they're adjusted to the right temperature. I know when you do install this per the Arctic installation manual, it does tell you to adjust this to so much fluid per, I think it's per minute or something like that, which is very important. So if you do acquire one of these, make sure after you get it put in, you do that adjustment. All right, folks, there you have it. This is the 30,000 BTU vehicular compartment heater, as the nomenclature says. It's for the multi-fuel burning. And again, the national stock number, or the NSN, is 2540-01-194-3323. Part number is 19207 Sierra, I think that's Oscar, Charlie November 11669898. This is the diesel fired or multi-fuel fired personal heater. Do not run black diesel in these, you'll clog them up. I can vouch for that. I have a buddy that warned me about that, and mine wasn't clean enough. This one looks like it's put out by Stuart Warner Corporation, model 78385-10530 Bravo. Again, 30,000 BTUs. This will keep you warm enough at 40 and 45 below in the deuce with a hard top on. I run it on a yearly basis up here. All right, ladies and germs, hopefully that helps document a little bit of this, and thank you for listening to me drone on. I hope I kept you somewhat informed. Not a how-to video, but how I do it.